Meanwhile, Russia says it has taken full control of the eastern Ukrainian town of Avdiivka after Ukraine pulled its troops out on Saturday. This footage from Russian state media shows Russian soldiers occupying the now ruined former industrial hub in the Donbass region. Moscow has claimed that Ukraine's retreat was so rushed and poorly planned that some Ukrainian forces were left behind. Ukraine's military has acknowledged casualties during the withdrawal, but says the situation is stable. Taking Avdiivka would be Moscow's biggest win on the battlefield since the capture of the city of Bakhmut last May. Let's go through this with Frank Ledwich. He lectures in strategic studies at Portsmouth University in the UK. He's a former military intelligence officer and joins us now from the English city of Oxford. Welcome back, Frank. How big a blow is the loss of Avdiivka for Ukraine?
It's certainly a defeat, but I would say a couple of things. First of all, that this was a question, certainly over the last 6 months, of when and not if. The Ukrainians were in a precarious position there. They're in what's called a salient or a kettle. But, I mean, there's no bright side particularly to this, but a couple of observations on what Phil, the Russians, are saying. First of all, there's no question here of entire brigades being encircled, captured and killed. The Ukrainians did manage to withdraw from that salient and seem to be conducting quite an effective defence west of it. But there's equally no doubt that strategically this comes at a very bad time. Obviously, there are the decisions to be made in the US Congress, and Ukraine, the message perhaps from Ukraine, one would hope would have been one of continuing success, and this isn't that. But like I say, this is when, not if. The timing is unfortunate, but the Ukrainians do seem to have withdrawn in reasonably, by the chaotic standards of these things, reasonably good order.
Right. And the city itself, is this a sort of symbolic victory for Russia, or does it actually have strategic value?
If you look at it on the map, it's about 20 kilometres from the centre of, or rather from Donetsk city. And it was the last place from which Ukraine, for the last decade or so, was able to shell or menace Donetsk city, which is a huge embarrassment for the Russians. So to that extent, it's significant. I don't buy the argument made by some, and it's clearly not the case, I think, that this is somehow the key to Donbass or even Donetsk Oblast. It's not. It's not an especially significant strategic place. Its significance lay, same as Bakhmut, in the fact that it was being held and it was something of an embarrassment. So I think one can say a little more than that about it.
Right. And how has Ukraine's shortage of artillery and ammunition played not only into this defeat, but the war effort overall?
Yeah, the artillery is interesting. It's not simply a case, I think, of the West not supplying enough. There's no doubt whatsoever that the Ukrainian army is suffering what has been called for the last, well, the term it goes back to the First World War, shell hunger. They are outmatched somewhere between 4-1 and 7-1, some say more in some places. And it's certainly contributed to Bakhmut. But the challenge of the West is, even if US assistance in the form of money comes through, where this new ammunition is going to come from. This was a problem throughout last year as well. And it was a problem because the West simply doesn't have the ammunition or won't give what ammunition it has. It's not really a question of money at the moment. There's also the issue as well, it's rather more complex, of different kinds of ammunition. And Dmytro Kuleba raised this at the Munich Security Conference. That, look, this is a complex issue. There's no doubt whatsoever Ukraine is in real trouble with respect to artillery, but one is slightly lost as to what the solution may be over the next year.
Right. And just a quick word about some comments that were raised at the Munich Security Conference at the weekend. Various officials were quoted as dismissing a perception that Russia is now on its way to winning the war and Ukraine on the brink of collapse. Are they right to do that?
Yes, I think so. Ukraine's nowhere near collapse. This is a stage one had in the Second World War, 1942, or during the First World War on the Allied side, or both sides in 1916. It's where Ukraine is now digging in, both literally and metaphorically and psychologically. And no Ukrainians that I speak to are talking about collapse. What they are talking about now, officially and unofficially, is, look, we've got to dig out our psychological and physical resources. They're on the defensive now. The issue here is how they're going to handle that defence. At the moment, it seems like they're going to rely on much the same tactics as the Russians did last year, or operational level of prepared defences. And I think that's pretty wise in the circumstances. Now, they're nowhere near collapse. I mean, you only need to look at the map to see that. Yes, Russia's making incremental advances, but if the taking of a relatively small town after 2 years of effort counts as some sort of overwhelming victory, the Russians really are in trouble.
Clear as ever. Thank you so much for that, Frank, a military analyst at Frank Ledwich.
Thank you.